You know, our modern world, it runs on energy, and so does its defense. But what if I told you the systems that get fuel to, say, a fighter jet are facing this crazy double threat? It's like a slow-motion problem crashing head-on with a high-speed digital one. Let's dig into it. Okay, so when you see a fighter jet streak across the sky, what do you see? Pure power, right? But here's what you don't see. Thousands of miles of pipelines, giant refineries, massive storage tanks, all of it is part of this huge civilian-run supply chain. And the scary part? It's way more fragile than any of us realize.
All right, so to really get a handle on the dangers here, we've got to shine a light on this invisible lifeline. How does a military actually get its fuel? And what are its weak spots?
So check this out. When you think about all the fuel a military burns, a massive, and I mean massive, 70% of it is for aviation, jet fuel. So what does that mean? Well, it means that any hiccup in the jet fuel supply isn't just a minor issue. Nope, it literally grounds your entire Air Force.
Now, to deal with this crazy logistical puzzle, NATO came up with something pretty smart, the single fuel policy. The idea is simple and honestly kind of brilliant. Let's just use one main fuel for almost everything. That fuel is F-34, which is basically their workhorse jet fuel. It goes in the planes, sure, but also in many of the tanks, the generators, you name it. It makes logistics way easier. But you see the problem, right? It also creates one giant single point of failure. If something happens to the F-34 supply, well, everything just stops.
And that brings us to the first major threat. And this one isn't some big, flashy attack. It's more like a slow squeeze, a systemic pressure that's been quietly weakening Europe's fuel infrastructure for a long time.
Here's the heart of the matter. The military doesn't have its own, private energy industry. It completely piggybacks on the civilian world for everything, refining the crude oil, storing the fuel, moving it around. So what happens in the commercial market doesn't just stay in the commercial market. A problem for them is instantly a problem for national security.
And here's what that looks like in the real world. As Europe moves towards greener energy, its old-school fuel infrastructure is literally shrinking. Get this. In just the last 15 years, 21 oil refineries have shut down for good. This isn't some far-off what-if scenario. The actual physical ability to make military-grade fuel is vanishing as we speak.
Okay, so that was the slow threat. Now let's talk about the fast one, the one that happens in an instant. It's the digital kill switch, the power for an adversary sitting maybe thousands of miles away to bring our physical energy grid to a grinding halt with just a keyboard.
To really get this, you need to understand two acronyms, IT and OT. Think of IT, information technology, as a company's brain, all the laptops, the email servers, the billing systems. Then you have OT, operational technology. That's the muscle. It's the hardware and software that physically turns the wrenches, opens the valves, and runs the pumps on a pipeline. And for the longest time, these two worlds were completely separate. Well, that's not true anymore. And the Colonial Pipeline attack is the perfect and frankly terrifying example of this. The hackers never actually touched the pipeline controls themselves. They hit the IT network, the business side of things. But the company got so worried that the hack could jump from the brain to the muscle, from IT to OT, that they did the unthinkable. They shut down the entire 5,500-mile pipeline. Just like that. A purely digital attack on the business network led to a massive, real-world shutdown of critical infrastructure. And the weapon they used? Ransomware. You've probably heard of it. It's basically digital kidnapping for your data. Malicious software gets in, encrypts all your important files, and says, "Pay up, or you'll never see them again." It's exploded into this multi-billion-dollar criminal industry, and its new favorite target is the exact kind of critical infrastructure we're talking about.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got two big problems brewing. On one hand, a slow, physical decay of our fuel infrastructure. On the other, a super-fast, constantly evolving digital threat. The real danger, the perfect storm, is what happens when these two worlds collide.
So what does happen when a highly sophisticated cyber attack hits a system that's already stretched thin, with way less backup than it used to have?
Let's go back to that physical squeeze for a second. The projections are just staggering. Europe's refining capacity could drop by as much as 85% by 2050. Now think about what that means. You have fewer and fewer refineries all concentrated in just a handful of spots. Each one becomes a bigger, more critical, and frankly, a much juicier target for an attack. And while our infrastructure is getting more fragile, the attackers are getting scarily good. Listen to this quote from the president of the Interstate Natural Gas Association of America. He said they're now worried about sophisticated, well-resourced nation-state actors.
We're not just talking about rogue hackers in a basement anymore. We're talking about government-backed teams with huge budgets building custom malware that no one's ever seen before, so-called zero-day attacks.
And this is the collision point. This is where it all comes together. When you have fewer pieces in your system, each one becomes that much more important, right? Taking out one refinery when you have a dozen backups is an inconvenience. Taking out one refinery when you only have a few left? That's a catastrophe. The damage from a single successful cyber attack just skyrockets. Okay, I know this all sounds pretty bleak, but the good news is people are working on this. So what are the actual solutions on the table? How do we build a tougher, more resilient energy future for everyone?
So on the fuel front, it's all about finding alternatives. But for the military, not just any alternative will do. The real holy grail is something called drop-in fuels. We're talking advanced biofuels or synthetic fuels, also known as e-fuels. Why are those the winners? Well, because other options like methanol or ammonia just aren't practical. They require totally new engines, new pipelines, new everything. A military just can't make that kind of switch overnight. And that's why these drop-in fuels are so crucial. They're designed to be, for all intents and purposes, chemically identical to the fossil fuels we use today. You can literally just pour them into the same fuel tank on a fighter jet, and it works. This is a game changer because it means the military can go green, or at least greener, without having to junk trillions of dollars worth of planes, tanks, and ships. Now, over on the digital side, the Colonial Pipeline attack was a massive wake-up call. The old way of just offering voluntary guidelines for security, yeah, that went out the window. The TSA stepped in with new, mandatory rules. Now, critical pipeline companies have to appoint a specific person for cybersecurity. They have to report incidents super fast, within 12 hours. They have to go looking for their own weaknesses, and then they actually have to fix them.
But look, let's be real. These new rules aren't a silver bullet. There are still some really big challenges. Like, does the TSA even have enough people with the right skills to enforce this stuff? And there's a huge debate going on. Is it better for the government to give companies a specific checklist of things to do, or should they just set a security standard and say, you figure out how to meet it? These aren't easy questions, and it just shows you how messy this whole thing is.
So, when you boil it all down, it comes to this one big question. We're obviously moving to a new energy future, and everything's getting more and more connected online. That's not stopping. But as we race ahead, we have to ask ourselves at every single step, are we building security and resilience into these new systems from day one, or are we just creating a whole new set of catastrophic vulnerabilities for the future?